Alright, so here we have two new motors from my RC Mart. These are actually prototypes that they sent me. Thanks my RC Mart for sending me these prototype motors so I can test them and share the results with you guys. So these are the RCX 2207, 2400 and 2700 kV. As you can see, I just went ahead and scribed the motor kV values here because they were not labeled, so I didn't want to get them confused. So these, as I mentioned, these are prototype, and they wanted to know how these motors perform and how they compare to the other top motors. They just wanted to make sure that they're competitive. So they asked me to test them and give them the results so they can make changes accordingly, so that they want a competitive product. So I went ahead and tested them as usual and gave them the results, and they asked them if I could release results to you guys. I know you guys are being always looking for RCX development, so here's the latest. So yeah, they said go ahead and release them. They feel that these are pretty close to final. They may still make some changes, probably maybe on the kV value they may adjust it here and there a little bit, but for the most part they're gonna end up being just like you see here. So typical fashion from my RC Mart, they're going for lightness on the motor, and as you can see, they're using the 4-spoke pattern on the bell, so that keeps the weight low, and pretty much constructed as the 2306 that I tested recently. Aluminum 7075 bell cap and ring, and also the base is supposed to be 7075 aluminum. Shaft is hardened steel, and it is hollow all the way through, and they went ahead and they're using a screw for retaining the shaft, so that's pretty good. A lot of people prefer these screws. I think I still kind of like the circlips a little bit more. With the screws you have to be careful when you remove them, otherwise you'll end up messing them up, and then it's really hard to remove. So the best way I've found to remove them, I usually mention in most of my videos, I just use my soldering iron and just leave it there for like 10 minutes. So the heat will loosen the thread lock, and then you can crack it loose pretty easily and then remove it. Otherwise you're gonna end up, if you don't do that, you're gonna end up messing up the head of the screw. You're gonna cam it, and it's gonna be hard to remove. So here's the shaft. As you can see, it's hollow all the way through, which is pretty good. Makes it light, and also from what I understand, it removes stress points at the weakest point, so it kind of helps prevent the shaft from shearing off on hard impacts. So the motor comes with about 150 millimeters of wire leads, motor leads. So with that much wire, we're gonna weigh it, and then we'll subtract it from another piece of wire that I'm gonna weigh, which is equivalent to leaving this wire at that 50 millimeter length. So with the 150 millimeters worth of wire, it's 34 grams. So if we cut the wire and leave it at 50 millimeters, then you're removing basically 2 grams. So that's 32 grams for a 2207. Pretty decent weight, pretty good weight. That's pretty light actually. So as you can see, they went with the naked bottom, pretty small base on this motor. And this one looks like the 16 by 16, so it's a square pattern. So it looks like they're not using the 16 by 19 anymore. It looks like 16 by 16. So that's pretty good. Keeps the weight low. So the base is also aluminum 7075, and as you can see, they're going with the typical for RCX. This is a 4 by 9 by 4 millimeter bearing, so a pretty good size bearing there. And these are pretty high quality bearing, ISO Japanese bearings. So remove the screw. So now let's take it apart, and we'll take a look at it on the magnifying glass. But first, these my RCX motors, the bearings are they're easy to remove, so that's I like that on these motors. They fit just snugly. Just so pretty good tolerances. A lot of the motors, the bearings just pop out, but they're they don't sit loose on the bearing housing. So this one is, as you can see, this is a 9 millimeter by 4. It's the width, 4 millimeters. So, and the shaft, of course, is 4 millimeters. So let's look at it on the magnifying glass. Let's get a closer look. Okay, so here's the stator and the bearing. Goes in pretty easily. And looks like they're using, I want to say these are 0.15 millimeter laminations. They're pretty thin. As you can see, the windings pretty neat, pretty nicely done. The windings is there. And here's the bell. Arc magnets, as you can see. And dynamically balanced, of course. So overall, looks like a pretty well made motor. So let's put it together and let's run these on the thrust stand. Let's see what this can do. Alright, let's go on to the thrust stand. Alright, so that was the thrust test for the RS2207-2700KV from RCX. The motor actually measures at higher KV at 2930, so quite considerable amount higher. I don't know if this is gonna be called RS. I'm just calling it RS because that was the same series that they were using with the 2206. Although there are some differences from the 2206, so I'm not sure if they're gonna keep that RS series name. Again, this is a prototype, so not sure if they're gonna lower the KV value on this particular motor. But as you saw, the motor is quite powerful on 4S. Any of these props, just pick your prop and you get all kinds of power. So you can just look at the thrust numbers here. They're above 1600 grams. Then it just clears 1700 with a 5043/3 on 4S, which is pretty high. Of course, the amps are gonna be high for these thrust, but keep in mind these are static and I'm using a power supply for a single motor, and that maintains the voltage pretty high. So that's why also static thrust is always much higher and harsher on the motor. When you get in the air, of course, this is gonna drop by up to 35, even sometimes even 40%, depending on your setup. So amps are still pretty manageable. I think if you just multiply this times 0.65, you'll see that the amps are gonna be manageable. And again, that's gonna be burst amps, so you'll only see those momentarily. When you come out of dives or doing a 180 and then punching out. But overall, this motor is pretty powerful. We'll see how these motors perform when they come out. I'm sure people are going to be grabbing them and installing them on their quads, and we'll see what people have to say about them.
pretty good overall. Okay, so that's the tests for these new prototypes from RCX. Again, thanks RCX for sending them for testing, and I'll be looking forward to seeing these guys in the air, see what you guys think about the motors. Hopefully they perform as good as they did here on the thrust stand. Pretty good options, it looks like, from RCX again. Alright, thanks for watching, and until the next video.